Welcome to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, where we discuss all things wellness.
I'm Elanie Welch, nutritionist.
And I'm Kay Boyer, health enthusiast. Welcome back, Renegades.
Welcome, Renegades.
Welcome to a double Elanie today, because if you're watching on our videos, which I know a lot of you just listen in the car, but you would think, oh my gosh, is that two Elanies on the screen? Because I copied Elanie's awesome hairdo and I put on a cute little bandana with a bun. Since she's had kids, this is what she's, or as a kid, now this is what she did. So you're thinking we're twins today.
Yes, because that is the only thing that separates our appearances.
We look identical.
Otherwise.
Gosh, we're both so good looking, you know?
It's true.
That's the other thing that makes you a twin. If you're both good looking, ridiculously good looking, and have a bandana on.
Yeah, that's all you need.
You can't tell us apart.
All podcasters look the same, right?
Yeah, they do. They do.
Oh, yay. Well, today we get to talk about the MTHFR mutation.
Rats.
Which we don't cuss anymore on this podcast.
I know, we've really cleaned up our language.
Cleaned it up, but I have always referred to it as the motherfucker mutation.
Yeah,
the mother bleeper mutation.
The mother effer mutation.
It's the mother effer because that's how it's MTHFR. Just when you
all
are glancing at it, looks like mother effer. So.
Yes, that's true. One time you sent me an article on it, and I was like, "That looks like mother effer."
Yeah,
and then you're like, "Yeah, it really does."
That's what I call it.
Yeah, that is so funny.
And because it messes with our bodies so much that you do just want to be like, you mother effer.
Right. It's appropriately named.
Yeah.
Gosh. And for our listeners here, if you're familiar enough with it, you know what this gene is. And the rest of you are just like, why are they talking this way?
Right. Well, we'll get into it. The episode is for the 90% of you that either have heard of it but don't really know what it is or have never heard of it before.
Yep, and I now only know of it because Elanie looked at my blood work, God bless, and that's the bad gene for me. And now I'm very acutely aware of it.
Yes.
Every day when I take my B vitamins.
Yes. Kay had the heterozygous copy, which is when you have one copy of the gene. We won't get into a genetics lesson
the words
today,
you're saying, but I'll take my B vitamins.
Yeah. I'll get into it a little bit. But yeah, I think the MTHFR mutation has become something of not a buzzword per se, but maybe a buzzword. You might hear about it or see it a lot, and maybe you just feel like it's too late to ask what it is now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. You ever gotten so deep into a topic with somebody that you don't know what they're talking about, but you've already nodded and smiled too many times. You can't go back and be like, what is that actually?
Yeah. That is so hilarious and true.
Yeah.
We've been there.
Yeah. So maybe you feel that way about the MTHFR. You're like, everybody's been talking about this for 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the more public world, we've been talking about it for longer than that. But anyway, maybe you're just like, it's too late now to ask what it is. So I'll just tell you what it is and you didn't have to ask. So.
Yes, good.
Explain that word for the other person
in
this room who doesn't know.
A friend.
Asking for a friend. Yes. So MTHFR is the abbreviation for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase.
I understand why they
MTHFR. Methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. It's an enzyme and it's also a gene. So I know that can be a little bit confusing when we talk about having the MTHFR mutation, and it's like a genetic mutation. It's also an enzyme. So in its role as an enzyme, MTHFR is needed for the process of metabolizing B vitamins, such as folate and homocysteine in your body, which we'll get into more about homocysteine and what that is. Folate, vitamin B9, is a water-soluble vitamin, and the main role that folate plays in our body is the synthesis, replication, and repair of DNA and RNA. So it's very important for maintaining the health of our DNA, which, as we know, if we don't have healthy DNA, then we can develop things like cancer. B9 has many roles in the body, but it's especially essential for cell proliferation. So the basically cell replication and tissue repair and survival, and it plays a key role in repairing our brain cells and improves our memory and concentration. So It's a pretty important vitamin.
That is important.
And because folate is necessary for breaking down homocysteine, the effects of MTHFR on folate also impact our homocysteine levels in our body. So homocysteine is an amino acid. Amino acids are all the building blocks in our body that make up proteins, which make up everything else in the world. Homocysteine is basically, it's a byproduct of the creation of the amino acids methionine and cysteine. So just so that you understand where it comes from. You don't have a test at the end of this that you have to remember that for.
You're just, every time I hear you talk, I'm like, gosh, she's so smart.
It's just smart. Big words. That's the key. You just use big words.
Yep.
And homocysteine plays a key role in methylation, as do the B vitamins. So methylation is a process in our body in which basically it has several roles, but some of those are epigenetic modifications and imprinting. So in other words, it helps with the regulation of our gene expression. So now you're getting it. Vitamin B9, folate plays a role in gene and DNA repair. Homocysteine plays a role in the methylation and regulation of gene expression. Homocysteine also, methylation is a process that also affects our energy and our detoxification in our body. It generates glutathione, which is an antioxidant that helps our body clear away toxins. So lots and lots of things that can be impacted when we are not metabolizing our B vitamins or homocysteine very well, because we have detoxification being impacted, gene expression being impacted, DNA and RNA repair being impacted, brain cell repair being impacted, memory and concentration being impacted, all sorts of things.
Which hits like quality of life, especially like the energy. I feel like anytime someone says like this affects your energy, I'm like, I'm listening.
Yes, you know, yes. Like, K pops out of her prairie dog hole. Yes. So homocysteine plays an important role in our body. However, you can have too much of a good thing. So high levels of homocysteine cause significant inflammation in our body, and it can damage our arteries and increase the risk of forming blood clots, which increase risk of heart attack, stroke, heart disease, and other blood vessel disorders. So although homocysteine is important, it's largely known as a marker for inflammation in our body. The MTHFR gene mutation impairs how our body metabolizes folate and other vital B vitamins and homocysteine. So people with the MTHFR mutation, where that gene and enzyme is mutated, they cannot process the B vitamins as well as they should. And specifically, we're talking about folate, but folate plays a role in the synthesis of a lot of, and metabolism of a lot of other B vitamins, such as our vitamin B6 and our vitamin B12. So it impacts B vitamins at large. Your body needs the folate to break down the homocysteine. So homocysteine, like we said, is also impacted. Healthy, intact MTHFR genes and bioavailable folate regulate homocysteine levels. When they're not healthy, that's when we have problems. Okay, so I think you get it, essentially, right?
I got it all up here.
I repeated the information enough that at least you could walk away knowing that the MTHFR mutation affects folate and homocysteine, right?
Yeah, I got that. Yep. I couldn't say the word, but yeah, we got that.
So how does that impact our health? Well, we've sort of covered a lot of ways in which it can impact our health, but there are also specific health conditions that the MTHFR mutation has been linked to. So in order to understand how this works, we have 2 MTHFR genes, one from each parent. This works with genetics in general. So when we say a heterozygous mutation, what we mean is that one gene from one parent is mutated, like we said Kay has.
Oh, got it. So I didn't know that just one. Okay.
And you have 2 copies of it. A homozygous mutation means both genes are mutated, meaning you got a mutated copy from both parents. So that's the more severe.
Tired.
Yeah, exactly. So you can imagine this happens on something of a scale where you either have 2 healthy copies of the gene, or you have one healthy copy and one unhealthy copy, and you might have some of the symptoms or symptoms to a more mild level. And then you have the possibility of 2 unhealthy copies, in which case the gene and the enzymes are really impacted and you're having a lot of problems.
Wow.
So in the United States, we estimate that anywhere from 20% to 40% of white and Hispanic individuals are heterozygous for MTHFR. So at least 20 to 40% have 1 copy that's mutated.
Okay.
I do think that number is probably much higher than we know, simply because we don't test a lot of people. And especially because when you're heterozygous for it, the symptoms can look like a lot of things, right? And having low energy and poor memory and poor concentration and even something like cancer is like, we expect those things now from our population. So I don't think it's the first step of any medical doctor to test your genetics and look for the MTHFR mutation unless you're having really severe effects. And the most severe effects that they're looking for are things like seizures and muscle paralysis. I mean, that's when you have the most severe condition of the mutation, but that's not most people. That's a very, very small percentage of people. But you can be significantly impacted in your health without actively dying. So, right. So I think that the number of people who have that mutation is much higher than we actually know. We simply aren't testing the population at large for it because the symptoms are so, I mean, they just look like everything else that's wrong with the world, right?
Yeah.
So the mutation is less common in Black people, affecting 1% to 2%.
Only 1 or 2%.
That we know of. But again, I think
amazing.
people of color are really underrepresented.
That's fair.
In the medical system. So how many women, like we were talking about this in our last episode, right? Women in general are underrepresented in the medical system, and women of color are extremely underrepresented. And a lot of them are not taken seriously. So again, I think it's more a lack of testing, a lack of their symptoms being taken seriously, that we just don't know that they have it. But of the people that are tested so far, we've only found 1 to 2% having that mutation. So the MTHFR mutation, whether you're heterozygous or homozygous for it, is linked to an increased risk of several conditions, one of which is cardiovascular disease, because as we mentioned before, the impact that it has with blood clotting. The MTHFR gene variations are, again, linked to increased risk of stroke because of cutting off the blood supply to the brain. Researchers performed a cross-sectional study on 67 patients with acute cardioembolic stroke stemming from a blood clot in the brain, and the study showed that patients with the MTHFR genetic defect also experienced elevated diastolic blood pressure and higher cholesterol. So all conditions that can contribute to cardiovascular disease. The mutation can also contribute to cancer. It's essentially because of the homocysteine and folate status. Those things are associated with increased risk for many cancers. A 2021 review published in the journal Genes found that a specific type of mutation, the C677T mutation, which is the most common mutation for the genes, was tied to a higher breast cancer risk. Not only that, but the mutation was also linked to more aggressive forms of breast cancer that spread to the lymph nodes. And this was specifically seen in women who had 2 copies of the mutated gene. So they were homozygous for that mutation.
Wow.
So not only do you have variation on whether you have 1 or 2 copies, but there can also be variations in specifically which genes are impacted. So the C677T is the most common one that we know of, but there are other genes associated with MTHFR that could also be mutated that we don't check as often.
I feel like everyone listening is like, I'm going to get mine checked right now. And if you did like what is it, like the, not Ancestry, but the other one.
It was 23andMe.
23andMe, then I didn't know how to find it in there. But Elanie looked through all my numbers and found the CCT whatever.
Yeah.
And then she could read it and make sense of it. I couldn't, but yeah.
I won't tell you how to do it at the end because it's really complicated, but I can direct you at the end. I have a little thing on where you can go to find out how to read that data.
Okay.
That raw data.
Cool.
The MTHFR mutation is also associated with autoimmune disease. A 2022 systemic review and meta-analysis in the journal Disease Markers showed that some MTHFR genetic defects are associated with increased risk of autoimmune diseases. Specifically, the mutation was a risk for a type of autoimmune disease known as Behçet's disease, which is inflammation and swelling in the blood vessels. And it was also associated with increased risk of multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Harumph.
Not great. Harumph. Yeah.
Harumph.
Autism is another condition that is associated with the MTHFR mutation. I think this one is really interesting. Usually autism, we refer to it as being on a spectrum. So you can have a spectrum of autism, which can also be like the spectrum of mutation that you can have in the MTHFR gene. A 2020 review and meta-analysis in the journal Research in Autism Spectrum Disorders found a significant association between MTHFR gene mutations and increased risk of autism spectrum disorder. The reason for this is that MTHFR mutations can affect methylation processes, like we discussed, such as neurotransmitter synthesis. So neurotransmitters are little chemical messengers that travel from our brain to our muscles to everything in our body. They essentially carry every piece of information our body needs to communicate what's happening in our surroundings and what we need to do within our body to compensate for what's happening in our surroundings. Altered neurotransmitter levels can potentially influence our brain function and development, and children with autism spectrum disorders have higher levels of folic acid, which is the synthetic form of folate in their bloodstreams, which is likely to happen because when we have an MTHFR mutation, it has to be, folic acid specifically has to be converted to folate before it can be used in the body, and it cannot happen with this mutation, methylfolate specifically. So it's an interesting association, but I looked into this. I can't remember when I looked at the research, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I would say. And I found something really interesting, which was when doctors started recommending mass folic acid, so synthetic form of folate, mass folic acid, supplementation for pregnant women, the same year that began to happen, we began to see an uptick in autism spectrum disorders.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I was looking at the graphs side by side, pulled them from different parts of like the health information websites that I was looking at, but I was just curious at the association between them in general. And you could see the year that we began more and more of the basically mass recommendation to supplement with folic acid, you could see that autism spectrum cases began to rise. And not only that, but we also began to basically supplement food because we realized that having insufficient folic acid was a problem. Mm-hmm. Well, insufficient folate was a problem. Okay. We began to basically add it to our food sources because Americans weren't eating a healthy diet. They weren't getting the vitamins they needed from food anymore. So essentially we just pump it into things like bread and grain that people were consuming on a mass scale, mm-hmm. so that people can get their vitamins. So anytime you see that a food is fortified, so breakfast cereals, a lot of times you see that they're fortified with B vitamins. Yeah. Bread, a lot of time is fortified. Pasta is fortified. All of these starchy, high carbohydrate foods that we live on in a standard American diet are fortified because that's what people were eating instead of the foods that actually contain folate, like leafy greens.
Yeah. So wait, your recommendation then for a pregnant woman is, of course, get it from real food. Right. But then if they're going to have a vitamin, it has to be like the methylated form?
Yes, the methylfolate form, which I can tell you, I have a couple recommendations at the end. However, yes, if you do not, if you, one, know your MTHFR status and know that you're either heterozygous or homozygous for a mutation, or you don't know your MTHFR status, you should assume you have the variant.
That's fair.
Because that's safer. and avoid all fortified foods like the plague. First of all, those synthetic forms of B vitamins don't do much for you anyway. But when you have that mutation, you build up levels of folic acid in your blood because your body cannot convert it to the forms it needs, and that can be really dangerous.
I never would have known this. Oh, my word. So the government's idea, or I guess the food company's idea to fortify it, they were trying to be good, but they messed with nature the wrong way.
Right, exactly.
It just didn't work.
Yeah, because we're adding a synthetic form of a vitamin, which is classic mankind to be like, we can make our own and it will be better, right? That was why doctors for so long were recommending specifically folic acid, because we believed the synthetic form was better than the folate form. But actually the opposite turned out to be true.
Fascinating. Fascinating. That is so America.
So avoid the synthetic forms of folic acid in multivitamins. It will say folic acid. Now, it can be confusing because some companies, even when they use folate, use the term folic acid because that's the term most people are familiar with, right?
Yeah, and they think it's the same thing just before and after,
Right. Yeah. We think they're basically the same,
like
but
interchangeable,
but they're not. So I as a general rule avoid any supplement that says folic acid unless you know that the actual form that they're using is a methylfolate form. And the reason we choose the methylfolate is because it's the methylation of folate that makes it usable for your body. Your body has to go through the process of methylating those folate vitamins in order to incorporate them. But because methylation is the process that's impacted by an MTHFR mutation, if you can get an already methylated form of the B vitamin, then you have it already bioavailable. Your body doesn't have to go through the process of methylating it. And for those who have a problem with methylation, that can be a real lifesaver. Hey there, Renegades. Elanie here, briefly interrupting this episode of the Renegade Nutrition podcast. I wanted to highlight a company that Kay and I have recently discovered that we love, and that company is Bulletproof. Bulletproof sells high-quality nutritional supplements, and every product that Kay and I have tried from them personally, we have found to be excellent. It's important when you choose a supplement that it contain the bioactive forms in order for it to be effective, and Bulletproof has just the right forms in just the right amounts. Right now, if you go to bulletproof.com and use the code RENEGADE15 at checkout, you can receive 15% off your order. That's Renegade, RENEGADE 15. Use that code at checkout to get 15% off, and we'll earn a small commission too. Thanks for your support. All right, back to this week's episode of the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Wow. Okay, I have a specific question just for myself, and I'm going to ask it to be a little selfish in case someone else has the same one. So, our friend Marie, you had her take, I think it's like Perfect Pastures desiccated liver.
Yeah.
Okay, from that brand, Perfect Pasture.
Yeah, it's Perfect Supplements,
Perfect
and then
Supplements.
Their brand is a pasture raised.
Oh, pasture raised desiccated liver. Okay, so I take a methylated B vitamin from Ancient Nutrition that's really good, but it has methylated B whatever in it, and it has beef liver in the supplement. So I take that every day to help with my MFTR whatever, mother effer thing. Okay, but now Marie showed me that desiccated liver, and I was like, well, I know how good liver is, but I don't want to eat it, so I'm going to take it in this pill form. So I ordered it, and I thought to myself, if I take that, do I not have to take my methylated B Ancient Nutrition, or is it still not methylated? So I need both, and I still get all the other good things from liver.
That's a really excellent question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So, and I do cover it at the end, but let's just dive into it now. Let's just dive into it now.
Yeah.
So, because I know Kay likes the, what do I do about it?
Yeah. I am eager to solve that. I was like, I cannot be a victim to my genes.
Yes.
I need to solve this. Okay, yeah.
So for the average person who knows they do not have an MTHFR mutation. So I looked at my genetics. I know I don't have at least the most common.
You lucky ducky.
The most common genetic mutations I don't have. I could have other genetic mutations associated with the MTHFR gene. I just don't know because we don't test every gene that's associated with that. We only test the most common ones. Okay. So anyway, I know I don't. For the average person, taking a whole food supplement like a desiccated liver capsule, which I do recommend, is probably an adequate way to get our B vitamins as long as we're also eating a nutrient-dense diet. Mm-hmm. If we are not eating a nutrient-dense diet, then the liver capsules are great, but I still recommend a methylated B vitamin on top of it. But if you're eating a nutrient-dense diet, then the liver capsules are enough. For people who have either a heterozygous, but especially a homozygous copy of that genetic mutation, then liver capsules on their own aren't enough because your body struggles to get the B vitamins that it needs from food, because for everybody, essentially getting our B vitamins from food is difficult for the body to do, which is why when you look at vitamins, they say it's like 12,000% of your daily value of like methylcobalamin, which is B12. Why do they have such high percentages when 100% of our daily vitamins is technically what we need, right?
Right.
It's because we only absorb a very small amount of those vitamins when we take them. So, and we get more of them from food, which is why I always recommend food sources, because it's just easier for our body to digest. But when we're isolating nutrients, then they're not working with all the other nutrients that they normally would be in conjunction with to help our body absorb them. So if you have mutations, you absorb even less. So you definitely still need a methylated B vitamin.
Okay, this is good to know. I was going to try to save on vitamins, but I'm buying both now.
I still also recommend for pregnant women. When I was pregnant, I also took the methylated B vitamin on top of what I was getting from the desiccated liver supplements, just because your body, and breastfeeding, I'm still taking the methylated form on top of it as well, because your body puts so many nutrients into growing a baby and then feeding a baby that I like to make sure, even with eating a nutrient-dense diet, I'm getting enough, because otherwise you end up with things like low energy and brain fog, which we think is just associated with being a mom, but is probably more associated with the fact that we're putting all of our nutrition into a different human.
That's true. The mother giving of herself starts right away. Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you. That clears that for me.
You're welcome. Just to cover a few other things that this mutation might be associated with. Another is anxiety and depression, also rampant in America.
Fair.
For many reasons.
Yes.
But potentially also associated with the MTHFR mutation. A case report in the International Journal of Scientific Research and Management showed a successful alternative treatment of using methylfolate for a 32-year-old man who had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, who had been basically receiving psychiatric treatment for years, which he wasn't responding to. So instead of continuing with antidepressants, his doctor had him start taking 15 milligrams of L-methylfolate. And after 4-month follow-up, the patient reported complete relief from depressive symptoms.
Look at that.
Now, a case report is one of the weaker forms of scientific study because it's just one person. So you don't necessarily know what else that person was changing in their life. Where you like to look is in a big population where you can see trends.
Yes.
But that's still, a case report is something that supports the idea that using the methylfolate instead of antidepressants was what actually relieved his symptoms of depression. A 2012 study had previously found that when patients were given 15 milligrams of L-methylfolate per day, as many as 92% achieved remission of symptoms within the first 6 months of therapy. So that confirms what we saw in that case report as well, with a larger population, although still not a huge population. So if you are suffering with depression and anxiety, and you're not taking any B vitamins or desiccated liver capsules or anything, perhaps try that.
Good place to start.
Good place to start, because you need it.
$20 a month.
Yeah, and you need it for 1,000 other things too, right?
Yeah. So, energy, no anxiety, depression.
Right. So
all those cancer things.
Heart health, brain health, protection from cancer. So even if it doesn't end up being associated with the reason that you have depression and anxiety, it's not going to hurt.
Right.
So another thing associated with the MTHFR mutation is male infertility. So there are some genetic factors that are responsible for defects in sperm health. Sperm health, again, plays 50% of the role in fertility for a couple. So if you're suffering with infertility, it's important to have both the man and the woman checked to have sperm health analyzed. And if there are problems with sperm health, MTHFR mutations could be impacting it. About 30% of male infertility has to do with genetic mutations, one of which could be the MTHFR mutation. The reason is that MTHFR is a precursor of a specific type of amino acid, adenosylmethionine, that functions as a methyl donor for DNA and amino acid methylation in the formation of sperm. So alterations in the methylation patterns affect the formation of sperm. And we have found that expression of the MTHFR mutation gene is higher in the testicles than in other organs, interestingly enough.
That is interesting.
At least in animal studies, that's what we found. And inactivation of the MTHFR gene due to like deficiency in folate ends up creating a condition of hyperhomocystinemia, so the buildup of homocysteine like we talked about, and infertility in male mice. So again, animal studies aren't the same as human studies. We need to see it in human studies. However, there are studies that have shown that individuals with that MTHFR mutation are more likely to have infertility, male factor infertility specifically.
Yeah. And just a reminder that this is a water-soluble vitamin, so you can't overdose on it. So there really is no like harmful side effect.
Yeah, you have to take massive doses in order to overdose on it.
Yeah. Because
you do pee it out. It doesn't build up in your body like the fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D and A and K can. Because when you consider that something like a multivitamin can contain 12,000 times or 12,000% of your daily value.
Yeah.
And that's just in a standard multivitamin. You would basically have to eat an entire bottle of multivitamins to have an overdose.
Yeah, right.
You do have other problems as well if you do that.
Yeah, that's true.
So what causes the MTHFR defect? There are, besides our genetics, because we know that genetics can give us the predisposition to have the defect. However, they don't necessarily guarantee that we have it, because we have the study of epigenetics in which our environment influences gene expression. So although you can have damaged copies, you can still have healthy gene expression when you turn off the damaged copies. So there are several environmental factors that can switch on those MTHFR defects, including exposure to heavy metals, glyphosate, which is the main pesticide, herbicide used in foods, and poor microbial health in our guts. So,
dang.
Gee, what a surprise.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Well, I mean, there's several pathways you can take with this. If you don't want to find out if you have the mutation, then again, like I mentioned earlier, it's safest to assume you do.
Yep.
And just work as if you do. Right. Exactly. Although it's pretty easy to find out if you have it. So if you are looking to supplement, the most important thing you can do, like we talked about, is understand the difference between folic acid, which is the synthetic B vitamin, and methylfolate, which is the bioavailable form of folate that the body can easily use. So look for supplements that say they have methylfolate or tetrahydromethylfolate. I mean, there's different variations of it, but you're looking for the words methylfolate and you're pretty much safe if you can see that. If you see folic acid, don't buy that supplement. Same for the other B vitamins. I mean, I am not going through the whole list, but things like methylcobalamin is the right form of B12 for your body. Cyanocobalamin is the synthetic form. So usually you can look at a supplement, and if you see cyanocobalamin and folic acid, you know the rest of the B vitamins are probably synthetic as well. Yeah. So that's how I do it. Those ones are the easiest forms to remember because I say cyano sounds like cyanide.
And we don't want to take that.
And we don't want to take that.
Yep. Good memory trick. I'll remember that.
Yeah, and methylcobalamin is methylated.
Because
That's
we want
an
it
easy
to be
way
methylated.
to remember it. Exactly. And then remember that fortified foods and supplements often contain folic acid, which is the synthetic form of folate because it's cheap and easy to use and widely available. So that's what we fortify foods with.
I remember eating cereal like 15 years ago and thinking, gosh, at least I got some vitamins in me. Mm-hmm. What a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I talked about, we absorb such a small percentage of our B vitamins, and those are the bioavailable B vitamins from our food. Now imagine when you're putting a synthetic form in, how little you absorb, because now that synthetic form has to go through an extra process in your body to be converted into a form that your body can use that then can be methylated. So just don't do it.
Just go for real things.
Just go for real things. And folic acid, while it's generally fine for people who don't have that mutation, their body can handle it. If you have the MTHFR mutation, then your body will just build it up in the bloodstream, and that can be really problematic. Again, pregnant women receiving prenatal vitamins, look for the methylfolate form. Don't take anything with the folic acid form because you don't know what your child's genetics are either. You may be heterozygous and have one copy of the MTHFR mutation, but your partner may also be heterozygous and your child may be homozygous because they could get that mutated form of the MTHFR mutation from each parent. So because you don't know what the genetics of your child are, it's safer to avoid folic acid because that's ending up in their bloodstream as well. You can ask your physician for a blood test to check for an MTHFR gene variant. Your standard conventional doctor will likely not do it unless you have those most severe forms that we talked about. So if you're having issues with tremors and gait and like seizures, then yeah, your doctor might order that test for you. However, most likely you're going to have to find a nutritionist or a naturopathic doctor or a chiropractor, somebody who can actually just order the test for you, who understands that just because you're not having like the worst form of the mutation doesn't mean you don't have it. Which, like Kay said earlier, affects your quality of life on a greater scale because who wants to have cognition problems and increased risk of stroke and increased risk of heart attack and increased risk of cancer, right? So we want to catch these things before they manifest into serious diseases. And unfortunately, that's just not part of the toolkit that your doctor has been given. You can also hack the information from the 23andMe health test. So there might be other health tests that look for it. I know the 23andMe. Now, they may actually start including it in their panel.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Enough
people have looked for it.
Yeah.
But if you've done 23andMe anytime in the last 5 years and not more recently than that, then you can download the raw data and specifically look for the mutation. So I won't walk you through the steps of doing that, but if you just Google how to download raw data from 23andMe, there's a website that comes up at the top that walks you through how to easily download.
Where to find it, yep.
Because you just do it from the 23andMe app on your phone or on your computer. You can download your raw data. They have to provide you with that because it's yours.
Yeah.
And then you can Google how to find the MTHFR mutation in it. And there's a step-by-step guideline that tells you specifically what genes to look for. It will tell you the amino it's really cool actually. It'll tell you
you're getting science nerdy on me. Your face is glowing.
Yeah. It'll tell you the specific amino acid sequence that should be there in a healthy gene copy, and then you can look for mutations in that sequence. It's pretty cool.
That is cool.
It's cool.
That is cool.
But again, if you don't know your status, the best thing to do is choose a methylated B complex that only has the bioavailable form of folate. And then the best idea is to get as much folate B vitamins as possible from your food because like we talked about earlier, when you isolate vitamins into their separate cells, then you don't have all the other components that nature provided to help your body absorb those vitamins because things like our plants and the animals that we eat, their bodies have evolved to help absorb those nutrients. And so when you eat them, you're eating all the nutrients that help with that process. So That's not to say I don't recommend having something like a B complex. I just recommend having it in addition to a nutrient-dense diet and something like desiccated liver capsules that's a whole food multivitamin. And then you can also check your B vitamin status with a blood test vitamin panel, because there are biomarkers that you can check to see, am I building up a lot of B vitamins in my bloodstreams, in my body, not being able to metabolize them well? That can be a really helpful tool. A naturopathic doctor can order it. I know Genova Diagnostics has a full vitamin and mineral panel that you can order that looks for the markers of B vitamin, basically B vitamin metabolism, and looks to see if you are metabolizing them well. So I would do that before you do any really heavy supplementing. So even if you know that you're homozygous, that you have 2 defective copies of the MTHFR gene, you don't want to go just willy-nilly getting like B12 injections and and taking crazy high levels of folate, because it may you may not be having issues if you're getting it in your diet. So it's best to know what your B vitamin status is before you do any really serious supplementation. Natural food sources of folate include leafy greens, avocados, broccoli, asparagus, and legumes. So basically all the dark green and green vegetables have a lot of folate in them, as well as some of the legumes.
Okay. I go in between eating really healthy and then eating like more convenient healthy, but I've reintroduced broccoli and beans, so I'm feeling good about this. I like passed today's test.
And you would know too, right? I mean, the best marker of what's happening in your body is checking in.
Yeah. How do I feel?
How do I feel?
I feel good.
Like I have good energy. I have good memory. But if you're having issues like, man, I feel sluggish a lot of the day, or I can't remember simple tasks that my boss assigns to me. I mean, there's a lot of other conditions that could be associated with. But one of the easiest things to do is try supplementing with the B vitamins and see if you start feeling better, because that's a pretty major clue. Yeah.
Yep. I like it.
Yeah, so that's what I got for you today on the MTHFR mutation. It's more of a like, here's so you can understand what this term means if you've been too afraid to ask.
Yes.
Episode.
for the people. We're going to have to entitle it like, feel better from the mother effer gene, or we'll have some real catchy something.
Get rid of that mother effer.
Yeah, that's right.
Take that mother effer out of your house.
Yeah, and this is like an example of where science actually affects like your day-to-day life, because I would not have cared about this word at all, Elanie, until I found I had it, and now I have to do B vitamins and I feel a lot better. Otherwise, I wouldn't have cared.
Otherwise,
now I can.
Yeah. Or you might just hear it and be like, oh, I'm hearing this term MTHFR, and it's associated with B vitamins. I'll just take a ton of B vitamins.
Yeah, right.
Just in case,
peasy.
right? And now we're talking about like, okay, well, here's how to actually be scientific about it and know what's best for your body, instead of just watching TikTok videos and introducing some new expensive supplement because somebody told you should. Like, now you actually understand the concept behind it and why it matters and what you can do.
Yes, and the folic acid. Yeah. That one was a big one for me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch that. Like something I wouldn't have known which word was better. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, stay away from it in supplements, and just in general, stay away from fortified foods, because the reason they're fortifying them is because they're devoid of nutrients in the first place. If you have to add nutrients back into your food, it's pretty much a good sign that it's not something you should be eating anyway. So
that's fair. That's totally fair. All right. Well, thank you, Elanie. And for our listeners, go be renegades.
Go be renegades.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is an educational service that provides general health information. The content on this podcast is not a substitute for direct, personal, professional medical care and diagnosis. You should always talk to your doctor before making a dietary or lifestyle change. Go be renegades!
Go be renegades!